Hey, welcome to the City Rev Life podcast. My name is Robey, and I have with me the lovely, the intelligent, the beautiful Rebekah Barnes.
Thank you.
Who I have the esteemed privilege of getting to be married to. And so we have Rebekah here with us today, and we're talking about dealing with stress practically. We're going to give you 4 practical things about dealing with stress. You know, that we've talked about some other things. We've talked about worry. We've talked about feeling vulnerable. We've talked about feeling anxious. But we're talking today a little bit more about stress. You feel that pressure on you. And I think in just times like this in the season, all of those things are pressing in on us, and things like stress right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I think people, you know, whether it's I've got to find a job or I've got to keep my job, dealing with stress. And we're going to be talking about particularly taking care of the body, because stress, it has an effect on our bodies.
Yeah, it does. There's a saying that says your body keeps the score. And so a lot of times stress can manifest itself in your physical symptoms. And so if your body is telling you something or trying to tell you something, you got to pay attention to that.
So before we get into the things to do to deal with stress, what are some of the ways that the body tends to keep the score? Like, what are some things how does stress actually manifest in our body? Because I'm sure all of us will be able to relate to this in one way or another.
Right. So, you know, if you have anxiety or worry, a lot of times, especially with kids, we'll see this, they feel it in their stomach. Right? So they have a stomach ache, and then sometimes you learn to know either that student in your classroom or that child, whenever they have anxiety, they feel it in their stomach. Some will even throw up, right?
Sure.
You know, that's an anxious response. So they're not necessarily sick, have the flu. That's just their body's way of informing you, hey, I have a lot of stress right now. So other things, like if you get really tense muscles, you know, on your back or something like that, or sometimes I know for even myself personally, when I check my blind spot like that and it starts to really hurt, that's usually an indicator for me I'm a little stressed. And it becomes a safety issue even, you know, just being able to drive safely. So that's another way. There's other ways though, you know, that have happened with people, just they genuinely develop a serious, you know, problems internally, and so they have to get doctors, you know, to look at it. They get it checked out, and sometimes it's stress induced, really.
Yeah.
So, or you might be predisposed to something, but stress can really skyrocket some of those things.
Yeah. So sometimes it can be something simple like I have a stomach ache, and then sometimes it can turn into an ulcer.
Correct.
Yeah. I've had friends that, you know, have a job that, you know, maybe it's a man or a woman, they're an executive, they have a lot of stress, a lot of pressure on them, and things like I've had friends that have had hives. You know, like their skin breaks out or peels, gets, you know, dry. I've had friends that have lost hair, you know, they've actually lost hair. Or, you know, it's interesting, I've seen pictures of presidents before and after their term. Just over the decades. And they look like it hasn't been 4 or 8 years. It looks like it's been 20 sometimes. Gray hair.
Or they lose it.
They lose their hair.
Stress just, it does a toll on their body, for sure.
Yeah, so we're talking about taking care of the body. Now, I think it's important before we go into this is to just very quickly a theology of the body, because this may seem like, well, I mean, is this really a spiritual subject? I mean, this is like, shouldn't we just, you know, focus on the spiritual side and dealing with the Lord on this? And absolutely. In some of our previous episodes, we've talked about dealing with anxiety with the Lord. And so, but it is also a very spiritual thing to take care of the body. And so just a theology then of the body is to appreciate God made the body. He said the body is good. So he wired it to keep score of our stress. We can see when we're dealing with stress. We can see that in our bodies. And so sometimes as Christians, we can have this perspective that the body is not really a spiritual thing. God doesn't really care about the body. He just wants us to, one day we'll leave our bodies. You know, our bodies are earthly. Our bodies are temporary.
They're always in decay. We're moving towards decay.
And as if the physical side God doesn't care about, or the physical side is unspiritual, but that is just not biblical. He made our bodies, and one day, even in heaven, we're not going to be disembodied. He will give us new bodies. And one day in heaven is not some kind of like spiritual dimension that's all cloudy and vague. He's going to remake creation. There will be probably,
Amen.
Which would be amazing. There will be a physical city. It talks about streets of gold, and it talks about trees and rivers, and it talks about walls and gemstones. And while that is probably figurative, it is still speaking to the reality that heaven one day will be very, very physical. The physical creation he made, he declared good. He cares about that, and he cares about us taking good stewardship of our bodies. And if we think that God doesn't care about the physical stuff, the physical world, then that actually leads us to just bad practice. It's bad theology leads to bad practice. If we think he doesn't care about the physical side of things and just the transcendent kind of spiritual side of things, then we do things like not take care of this world that he placed us in, not take care of our bodies. So when we're talking about stress, it is an act of worship to monitor your body, understand your body, and take care of your body. So with that said, we want to talk about 4 practical things you can do to take care of your body to help rid stress. We've talked about the spiritual side of things, but now the purely spiritual side of things. But now we're also talking about the spiritual practice of being good stewards of your body. So what's the first thing that we need to know about when it comes to stress in our body?
Right. Well, setting it up, first of all, is the unique way that God designed our bodies is to alert us with some stress hormones that, hey, something's a little off. We need to get balanced. We need to get regulated. So while chronic stress is not good, we are designed for some levels of stress within an appropriate level amount to be able to cue us. Hey, I need some food right now, or I need some water. So I think that's an important thing. What's happening chemically is your excitatory neurons are being activated, and you want those inhibitory neurons to be activated to kind of turn the switch off. So some of the first ones that we can talk about is, and this is something that is a common conversation with lots of people, is, hey, how'd you sleep?
Are you about to go into the very first one? Because I have questions about what you said before.
Okay,
so before we go to number 1, just make sure I understand. God wired the body to release a stress hormone. Neurons, something about
excitatory neurons tend to
can see why we have Rebekah on here, because I after the theology part I got nothing. I don't know what to do. Okay.
Well, it's cool because when you understand how you're made, you're fearfully, wonderfully made, and you get to see, wow, there's so much intentionality with our cells and how we're made. So a couple things. One is the excitatory neurons are triggered when our body needs something.
Okay.
Right? And a lot of times those things, when left unaddressed, can make us feel uncomfortable, shaky, uncomfortable, tense, pupils dilated. So we need to activate the inhibitory neurons, which tend to turn that off. So, and we'll go through the different ways to do that. But another thing that's worth putting here is when we start our day, if you were to measure our cortisol levels, which cortisol is a type of stress hormone, it starts high, and throughout the day, it declines. And that just is supposed to happen naturally. So as you decline, it's kind of an off-ramp right into your rest. But we're built in with a high level of cortisol at the beginning of our day because we need to get stuff done. That's just how we're built. Now, when the cortisol level stays high, that's when we start to fry ourselves because it's not meant to stay that high. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Cortisone and neuron. You see why,
I shouldn't.
God, I needed to be married to a therapist or I'd be stressed out all the time. So, no, I am tracking with that. We have the, what is it again? Cortisol?
Cortisol levels high.
Okay.
And that's normal in your day. It starts high and it's supposed to go down throughout the day.
So, and I think what's helpful about that is that it's helpful to know that God prepared us for stress. And that the fact that there is stress in life doesn't mean that something's wildly wrong.
Yeah.
We're prepared for that, but we're not prepared for unaddressed stress. Would that be fair?
Correct.
It's where these hormones are staying at a level where they're not, coming back down.
Yeah.
And that's when we start to do damage to our bodies, and whether that is, muscle aches or stomach problems or even severe damage, ongoing high blood pressure and some of those things. So our bodies are made to be able to handle stress, but the intention is that we're handling that stress and de-escalating that. Am I tracking here? Okay. So then give us the first practical tip in dealing with your body, because we all have stress one way or another. If you don't have stress, I would love to meet you and find out your secret. But the rest of us, we deal with stress. And so what is the first practical thing?
So the first practical thing is sleep. And that tends to be a common conversation in our household. It's, hey, how did you sleep last night? How did the kids sleep? Did anyone wake you up? Sleep is like,
it's gold.
It's gold, right? We center some of our morning conversations around sleep, because a good night's sleep can set you on a trajectory for, so much of the rest of the day. So, we might go into another completely different podcast another time on just sleep alone. That's how important it is. But for now, just some practical tips are things like, if you are struggling to get a good sleep rhythm, some practical tips are, it shows if you eat a protein snack 1 hour prior to your bedtime, that is supposed to help you sleep more soundly through the night.
Does ice cream count as protein?
Probably not that.
Okay, all right.
It's going to be more of a healthy cheese stick, something, maybe some hummus. Bacon, you're going to have some other dream issues maybe if you have bacon.
So maybe not the bacon. All right.
No, just a healthy protein snack, maybe a bar that is high in protein, less in sugar, that's healthy for you. So an hour prior to your desired sleep time to eat a snack. And then also, having a routine. So, maybe about an hour before you start with that snack, that starts your routine, and maybe you do some, relaxing things. So, on having a routine, they call it sleep hygiene. So, there's things that we do in our typical routine. We brush our teeth, we do things like that for our physical hygiene, which is important. But then also things like, okay, at the hour mark, I'm not going to be watching any more TV. I'm going to eat my snack. I'm going to shower. Things like lavender and vanilla tend to calm. Things like citrus tend to elevate. So if we're wanting to react those inhibitory neurons, we're going to want to use something soothing, like that type of aromatherapy. There's essential oils, there's candles, things like that are going to activate that. Things like citrus would be something you'd want to stay away from because that's excitatory. So you're going to, think about what you're smelling, what you're tasting, what you're eating, maybe a shower, maybe something that's going to calm you. Then you're going to want some of these other rituals, like maybe you're reading a book. With our kids, we do like a prayer, we do a song, and it sounds silly, but when you have a routine, those are some of the cues that help cue your body that it's time to start calming down now.
What about like screen time? You talk about not watching, Netflix or something right up until when you go to bed. Is there anything about like screen time that is stimulating your brain that is not as good?
So apparently, screens and our devices and television, all of that is kind of stimulates, especially the vision part of our brain. So you're wanting to kind of turn that off. And for some people, that's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. And that's great. If it's not a big deal for you, don't worry about it. Some people watch TV to sleep. But if you're having a hard time and that is something you're doing, you might want to change that and see if it makes a difference.
Okay, and maybe read a book, an actual physical. Imagine they still have them out there. You can find them, a physical with like paper and everything, and you can actually read a book.
Yeah.
What's so helpful about sleep, I think, is when we're stressed, we need more sleep, but when we're stressed, we're also more likely to find sleep being elusive.
Yeah.
And that's with a lot of these. With a lot of these, the very thing we need, being stressed makes it difficult. So someone might be watching or listening and saying, yeah, I'm stressed. I'd love to sleep. I can't.
Right.
Here are some practical things to be. Don't underestimate the amount of sleep. And I think, I don't know if this is just a guy thing or just, a thing in general, but I think a lot of times guys take pride. Now I can go with 3 hours of sleep over the course of a month, and as if that makes us stronger. And I think God wired us to need sleep and to take that seriously and value it. Get a good night's sleep. Your brain is going to function better. You're going to address stress better. And doing some of these things to land the plane well at the end of the day, finding those things that help, I think is huge because sleep is so important.
And I've loved how you've mentioned this before that, in biblical times, the day started at sunset.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really good mentality to have, is that if you want to start preparing for your day tomorrow, you got to start the night before.
Yep.
And so if at sundown, that's when in God's economy the day started, because you're going to be entering into that rest. And so you're going to want to make that part of your rhythm.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because there's so many reasons for that. That's evening, then morning. The day started in biblical times, and in Hebrew thought at sundown rather than at sunrise. It started when the sun went down. It's like, oh, a new day's upon us.
Yeah.
And there's a very practical side of that, because you're preparing for the day by how you go to sleep and how you rest. And so there's something very practical about that. So, okay, sleep number one, practical tip number one to dealing with stress and dealing with how your body's handling stress is sleep. What's next?
So next would be hydration. I think we've completely underestimated the power of staying hydrated, and specifically with water. So, we tend to enjoy other vices, our sodas and our caffeine and coffee, and not that those are all inherently bad, but for every one of those beverages that you're having, you're going to need to complement it with about 8 ounces of water. And you need at least, I think the 64 ounces of water a day. And the reason is because your body is going to respond so much better when you're hydrated. So if you are already thirsty, the research says that you are already 10% dehydrated. And once you are 10% dehydrated, your cognitive functioning begins to be impaired. So if at 10% you are dehydrated, and that's just a mild level of feeling thirsty, your cognitive abilities start to decline from there. Wow. So that's how powerful just staying hydrated is. Not to mention all of the other benefits that you tend to notice, just releasing toxins and just the alertness that happens when you stay hydrated.
What's interesting about that is it's such a simple thing, like drink more water. And I think there's no one that would be like, wait, what? Drinking more water is good for you? But it's such a simple thing.
Yep.
And it's a spirit. That is dealing and stewarding your body well, then it's an act of worship to take care of your body.
Right.
And I think, again, when we're stressed, it's, when someone's like, I got a deadline, they're just downing the coffee, they just keep downing the coffee, and that's dehydrating. Or it's just Diet Coke after Diet Coke after Diet Coke. Or it's, they get home, they're stressed, they're like, I just need a glass of wine. And so all of these things
actually dehydrate
they're dehydrating.
Right.
And what our tendencies are when we're stressed is actually working against the very thing that we need. What we need is to stay hydrated. And it might not be bad to have that cup of coffee. It might not be bad to, in moderation, have that glass of wine, but then make sure that you're hydrating well, so you're not working against the very thing that you're accomplishing. And I've heard people say, like, hey, you know what? I used to, right at that 2 p.m. slump in the afternoon. Yep. I used to go to get a cup of coffee, but I found going to get a cool glass of water. That's actually what revived my brain even more because of the hydration issue.
Right. Well, and I think it's important to note too that the lasting effects, you might get a shot of energy with the caffeine and the sugar, but then you're gonna feel the decline of that sugar or caffeine. What do they call that? The low from that. But with staying hydrated, like you're saying, around that 2 p.m., 3 p.m. mark, you're going to notice maybe more gradual, but a steady incline to your energy. And it's not going to be just this cliff that you fall off of around 4 o'clock. So the payoff may be gradual in the beginning, but it's going to be a longer payoff than some of these other beverages that we tend to go to.
Awesome. Okay, so sleep, number 1, hydration, number 2. What's number 3?
So number 3 is back to just eating well, eating appropriately. And I think that we all know, we hear that all the time, eat, exercise, diet, exercise, sleep. But there's a reason why they say it all the time, because it's true. So, I'm not here to promote one diet over the other. I don't necessarily know about all those different diets, but I do know that protein-packed foods tend to have positive effects on your brain, which is, the epicenter of a lot of our functions and our activities. So protein is good. Healthy snacks, they're saying on average, we need about a healthy snack every 2 to 3 hours. So, we see that built into most of our kids' days, especially if they go to school. Even if not at school, it's like we start to notice our kids need something about every 2 to 3 hours. And it's not that much different than adults. It's just adults tend to eat larger quantities and portions at our meal times, because the reality is it takes time to have a healthy snack. If you're in the middle of a phone call, if you're in the middle of a Zoom call, you don't want to be munching and eating. It's not as convenient. So being able to maybe plan ahead and having a protein shake, something that you can drink that's a little bit more socially acceptable if you're in a meeting or on a Zoom call. But they're saying, every 2 to 3 hours, your blood sugar needs something to replenish itself, something that's healthy. And then they did this research, which I thought was really interesting. They did research on a third world country, I believe in South America, where they looked at the typical diet of a community, and it was a low-income community. And at that place, the typical diet was rice and beans. And so they did a study where they were able to kind of monitor the portion control of a community. And they were able to say, okay, on an average day, this amount of rice is how much they're consuming. And so, and what they tend to do is, hey, maybe this community is affording about, a cup of rice a day. And so they're eating a cup of rice one time a day, maybe around lunch. So then they took that cup of rice and they broke it up into 3 or 4 bite-sized snacks throughout the day. And they noticed that even though the quantity of rice was the same, those who had the smaller portions of rice 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 times a day were significantly reporting better function than those who had the same amount one time a day. So it's just showing your body needs something more consistent, more frequent throughout the day, rather than just getting all of your calories in maybe just 1 or maybe just 2 meals of the day.
Yeah, as you're talking, it's dawning on me. So what happens when we're stressed? We have too many things on our mind, so we're not planning ahead and coming to work or to whatever it is that we're doing, or just our day with snacks ahead of time. And we don't have time to just stop in the middle and be like, let me go down and make myself a healthy snack.
Right.
So we're not planning ahead because we've got too much on our mind because we're stressed. So then we sit down, and by the time we get to a meal, we're hungry. So we eat more, which then makes us more sluggish on the other side because we have more that we're digesting. And by the way, when I'm deciding what I'm going to eat when I'm hungry, I'm not likely to make a good decision. Okay, so I'm like, stop and take 15 minutes to make a kale salad, or defrost this frozen pizza in less time and eat it, or just eat it frozen. So those kinds of decisions we don't. When we're stressed, it's just so much easier to be like, I'm sorry, I just have to get this project done. I just have to get this report done. I just have to study for this exam. Bag of Doritos, bottle of Mountain Dew. We're going. But in the middle of the stress, again, not cheating myself on sleep, not cheating myself on hydration, not deciding to punt when it comes to food. Those are easy decisions to make, but those are what we need the most in that time.
It's so true. And we've had this happen where we skipped breakfast, we had a busy morning, and then by the time lunch rolled around, or like around 1 or 2 o'clock, we just binge eat because we're starving. And then dinner time rolls around, and it's like, well, I'm not really that hungry. So it's like, So then you end up eating at like 8 o'clock. Which
you can throw off a healthy rhythm because of not just stopping and saying, look, I know I'm stressed, but stopping for 5 or 10 minutes and planning out what my eating strategy is going to be for this day actually is good stewardship for your body. And it's going to just pay off for yourself the rest of the day.
Absolutely.
So, I was just thinking about, this is again, this sounds super practical, but it's theological. Jonathan Edwards, one of the great preachers and theologians in American history, God used him as one of the key agents to start a national revival that went over into other countries. He used to intentionally plan what he would eat when he was in the study preparing his sermons, which is most of what he did. And it was a lot of things that were easy to digest. And he would do that intentionally so that he could be as productive as possible. So there, Jonathan Edwards did it. It's theological. Okay. Sleep, hydration, eating well. What's the last one?
again, might be obvious, but exercise, just physical activity.
Yeah.
So research shows that every 2 hours you need at least 10 minutes of something physical, just for, again, optimum learning and optimal cognitive functioning. So, that can look different based on the day of the week.
When you're saying like physical activity, like how intense are we talking
It's
every?
not intense.
Okay.
It's not. It's a walk. It's just walk around.
Yeah.
Walk around, go to the water cooler, say hi to your friends or your coworkers for a minute. If you can, just take a walk if you can. The weather's nice outside. This is something that I thought was a really good idea, especially if you're in the workplace, is doing wall pushes.
Interesting.
So it's basically like a push-up, but instead of having to get on the floor, especially if you're in clothing that's not super flexible, you go to the wall and you just do push-ups, and just kind of stimulate the
What
action.
if by doing that your coworkers make fun of you and that adds more stress to your life? Then what do you do?
I think actually it would add humor, which is even a better payoff. Now it might
Touche.
give them
She's so smart.
give them more something to laugh at, but hopefully you don't take yourself too seriously and you can laugh at yourself. So then you're getting the exercise and you're getting the added bonus of laughter and play, which that releases dopamine, which is a great transmitter to input when you're teaching a new activity. So
you win. All right. I concede. You won that one. Okay. So do wall pushes, go for a walk. Even just walking around, and maybe someone is home, they're with their kids. Say, hey, let's take a break, middle of the morning. Let's go for a bike ride. Let's go out in the backyard, run around a little bit. Just getting some exercise and not just staying in, typing mode, at the computer solidly.
And I think what's nice about 10 minutes is it's a bite-sized goal.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a full-on hour at the gym. Just give yourself a 10-minute physical activity break.
Yeah, I think this really trips up guys because I think if we're working out, it's because we want to look like a bodybuilder. I mean, it's vanity, that's what it's about. And so it's like, I think we as men need to be better about doing physical activity for the sake of dealing with stress and not being overly macho, like, I can handle stress. What are you talking about? Well, all your hair is falling out, so apparently you can't. Sorry, some of that's genetic. Okay, anyway, but I think that, I think a lot of times as guys, when it comes to exercise, we're like all or nothing. It's either I'm going to work out 5 times a week for an hour and a half, until I can, bench press what I did in high school, or I'm not going to do anything. Whereas, hey, just, get over yourself and just be a little bit active to help just get the blood flowing. And again, I think when we're stressed, well, that's the last thing I have time for. I don't have time for that. Well, maybe just, if you're home with the kids, just wrestling with the kids a little bit, chasing them around the house a little, playing some tag in the backyard, just, finding some ways to, when we're stressed, we're the least likely to exercise, but it's probably when we most need it. Most need it.
Absolutely. And the purpose and the function behind these interventions are not to, it's for brain health. We're not looking to run a marathon, and this is part of your training to do that. It's about brain health, and brain health is where you want to intersect with stress, because that's the core of where a lot of that comes from. It starts in the brain and then it affects and goes through the rest of our body. And it says, with our nervous system, our neurons can travel the length of a football field in less than a second.
Wow.
So when our brains are sending signals, they are happening at such a rapid pace, and we sometimes don't necessarily, of course, we don't feel or notice when that's happening. We only see the effects of how it manifests itself. So if our brain is happening that quickly and we're wanting to kind of turn off some of the unpleasant experiences and feelings that happen with stress, these are just some ways to interrupt that. It's not going to go away, but hey, reset it. Reset your cortisol level. Hit the reset button with some of these neurotransmitters that are excitatory, and get a little break. So then when you engage in that activity again, hopefully it's not at the same level of intensity that you just once had.
So these are the 4 main things. Sleeping, hydrating, eating well, exercise. Those are the 4 main ones. And any other just tips along the way? Any other things outside of those 4?
So just other random techniques. that you can do throughout your day, especially your work day, it sounds very pious, but there's actually research that shows that saying a prayer is actually therapeutic.
Imagine that, ladies and gentlemen, imagine that praying to the Almighty God who has control of the universe and can solve all your problems without even thinking. Imagine that there's research that demonstrates that deals with your stress.
Right. And our secular world tends to phrase it as meditation and things like that. And not to say that it also shows similar statistics, but saying a prayer, it actually getting your mind to focus on that.
I think the point is that doesn't just have spiritual benefit, but just God has wired you that also has physical benefit. And don't forget that, and don't underestimate that, either on the spiritual side or on the physical side.
And something that I've had to learn to do is, if I find that I've said like the same prayer, oh Lord, help me through this day, over and over again, it's like I don't have any other creative ways to ask this particular prayer. I have to train myself to send out a text and, ask my prayer warriors, like, I know I'm asking for prayer again with patience with the kids, or, all of the other challenges that we're experiencing. But it's an act of humility. And there are times when I've said the same prayer over and over again, but as soon as I send that text, I feel the impacts of those prayer warriors praying for me. And sometimes it's like 15 or 20, and sometimes it's just 2 or 3. It all depends on what it is that you're asking for prayer for about. And if it's your really close-knit friends, they know what you're going through. But that has, when I've hit that wall spiritually where I'm like, this prayer is just not doing it for me. Or at least it feels like it's not doing for me. It's like, you know what? That's my cue to reach out to other people. Yeah. And almost instantly, it just has such an impact on me. So that's my personal experience, but also research shows that makes a difference. So that, also deep breathing. Again, that seems so weird to do. And if you would permit me, I'm going to get over myself and lead you in an example of what deep breathing can look like.
Oh, we're doing this right now. All right.
And you are a part.
I'm the patient.
A part of this, yes.
Okay.
So, because it's like, okay, how do you do deep breathing? Well, you can do the simple, like take in a breath, hold it, and then let it out. Okay, and how do you feel right now?
Amazing. Like $1 million. Never felt better in my life.
All right. Well, he's being told to say that. No.
I did not know I was going to be doing this before this podcast episode, but I'm in it. I'm loving it.
Super
All right,
fun
what's
for me.
Next? What's next?
Okay. So next would be, so if I count to 5 or snap 5, you're going to take in as big of a breath as you can in 5 seconds. You're going to hold the breath for 5 seconds, and then you're going to push the entire breath out for the remainder 5 seconds. So this is a 15-second exercise, but you're just using your mind and your body to kind of think for a minute on your breathing. Okay, so can we do this together? I'm going to snap.
All right, I'm in. Do I need a paper bag to breathe into or anything like that?
If you have one at home and that's going to help you, you go for it.
I'm kidding. Oh, let's do this. Let's do this.
So ready? 1, 2, 3. Hold and out. 2, 3, 4, 5. Is all your breath out?
There, so I went 6 seconds. Did I ruin it?
You did great. I probably did it a little fast, actually.
Okay.
So
well, I hit it.
So
I can. In all seriousness, all jokes aside, I can imagine why that would be weird to do on a podcast episode for untold people to watch.
That was fun for me,
However, alone in my office, I can understand why it's. I think you are giving us the age-old, hey, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
You know, you're telling us why the age-old advice, and actually practically how to do that.
Right.
You're giving us the wisdom of a therapist and the research that there is a reason we say that.
Right. And so the other thing behind that particular exercise, rather than just taking a deep breath and letting it out, is it forces you to count. Now, counting would require you to use the left side of your brain. Left side of your brain is going to be more logical. It's going to be less tied to your emotions, and emotions are what make us feel the impact of our stress, right? So your emotion side of your brain is your right side of your brain. So you're wanting to give your right side of your brain just a little break. And so by counting, you're kind of using the left hemisphere of your brain for a minute, and that's going to give your brain the much needed commercial break from a lot that's going on, that's keeping us stirring, keeping us going, keeping the emotional side activated, which makes us feel things so much more intense sometimes than we want to. Or if you ever had a situation where you're like, I'm feeling this so much stronger than the situation would allow. It feels disproportionate. That's always a good cue. All right, my left side of the brain needs to take over a little bit for now. And so that counting causes you to do that.
Well, that's great. And I was just thinking through, as you're hitting some of these other techniques, I was thinking through how something that I have kind of done kind of instinctually, but I realize is kind of combining a couple of these. Is sometimes, middle of the afternoon, I just kind of need a reset, or I'm stressed. Sometimes I'll just walk out of the office here at the church, and I will just go for, it's about a 10-minute walk to go loop around all of the warehouses here, and I'll just go for a walk. I'll take some water, and I'll pray. And so that's like 3 of those things in one 10-minute walk, getting some exercise, drinking some water, hydrating, and praying. And I found that to be an incredible reset for a lot of these
So when
things.
you do that at our home, is that what you're doing? You're getting a reset?
I'm getting a reset and praying over my family.
Oh, here's your water. Take this.
Yes. So
So real quick, just a couple more. We talked about how lavender and vanilla calm. So essential oils, I know a lot of times some people make fun of that, but there's research to be had on those being a calming or just some type of aromatherapy. Another one is chewing gum, believe it or not. Chewing gum is a stress reliever, just the constant pressure. And one of if you think about it, back to infancy, the oral cavity is our very first way to regulate ourselves. And so that becomes one of our first ways that we regulate is through that. And even sucking through a straw as an adult, it mimics that in our infancy. And it sounds, infantile, but those are actually proven, even as adults, to help calm. And then lastly, squeezing a stress ball. Something simple like that, like having something tactile to do, as well as a sense of pressure. You're going to activate your proprioceptive nerve endings in your skin.
that's just what I was thinking.
Yep.
How can I activate my proprioceptical?
Proprioceptive, nerve endings, and that is we talk about the 5 senses: our sight, our hearing, our tasting, our touch, and our smelling. But there are some other senses that we don't know. One of them is proprioception, and that is the sense of pressure. And so that's why a hug is so therapeutic, because proprioception calms the nervous system down. So when you get that pressure, one of the other things that you can do with sleep, we didn't really talk about this, is a weighted blanket. That is a typical occupational therapy intervention where you can order a weighted blanket and it gives you a sense of pressure up to like 15 pounds. Some people find that to be very therapeutic, others don't. But that sense of proprioception, that touch, and squeezing something, if you don't have someone around, getting a ball or something. I know that with ADHD kids, they do fidget spinners, because having them do something in their hands actually helps them be able to concentrate better. So some of that can also just de-escalate your stress.
So we're going to wrap things up here, but we've talked about a lot of practical things. This has been super helpful. And I think one of the benefits, a lot of this is not rocket science. Like you may say, look, probably no one's watching this or listening to this saying, wait, I need sleep, like time out.
Yeah.
Like we know we need those things. Some of the stuff is stuff you've heard before, like take a deep breath or, count. Like count to 10, but hopefully this has shown you the research and the reasoning behind some of that stuff. Here's how I just on a pastoral, you've heard kind of from a therapist, some of these things, but let me just speak to you as a pastor. The reason why taking care of your body is so important is another thing that people tend to do in times of stress is they turn to sinful practices. And because they don't have the discipline, they're going to something like alcohol abuse, or they're not disciplined on the media content they're taking in, or they're turning to something like pornography or something like that. And so often, because there's this need for dealing with stress, we choose the wrong things. So knowing how your body is wired, how God wired your body, dealing with that stress is so important. I want to leave you with this one last thought. Before I do that, any other things that you have for us, Rebekah?
I think we pretty much hit them all. Like you said, they're not rocket science, but they're just digging into the why behind the what.
I think that's exactly right. And so, and just in closing, I want you to think about there is a high stress induced thing that can happen to your body called hematidrosis. And that is where the blood, the veins and capillaries or something like that? Is that what it's called?
I'm learning from you right now.
So really, neither one of us have any idea what we're talking about on this subject. Anyway, no, but it's called hematidrosis, and basically it's where something bursts in the sweat glands and blood comes out. And so I don't know much about hematidrosis, but what I do know is it's a thing. But more importantly, what I do know is it is most likely what Christ was suffering in the Garden of Gethsemane. Yep. And he had a physical manifestation of the incredible anguish and stress that he was facing for you. And all that to say is your Savior, the one that you're turning to in those moments, and your Heavenly Father who is with you and watching over you. Your Savior Jesus is no stranger to stress. He took more stress than any of us can comprehend, and he will never leave you or forsake you. And so draw near to him in this time, and have a respect for how your body is wired and how he wants you to de-escalate your stress. So we're so glad that you've joined us. We hope that these tips have been helpful for you in dealing with something that all of us face. And so thank you for joining the City Rev Life podcast. We will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for joining us on City Rev Life. You can subscribe to this podcast, rate and review wherever you're listening to this. And we love it when you share it with your friends on social media. For more videos and content, go ahead and check us out at cityrev.org/podcast or download our City Rev Church app. Have a great day.